Just to confirm, guys, my screen is visible, right? Cool, yaar. So we'll be starting off, and before going into the depth, so what this is what we'll be covering about. The issue, according to me, in the way that we learn Android development, and also we'll have in depth about MVVM, while also comparing a little bit of MVVM with other architectures available. So first of all, about me, I'm an Android developer at Zomato. I've been here for the past 4 months, and I started off with Android in 2020. And back then, Java was the thing, and now Kotlin is the preferred language of use for Android development. Then I've worked at small internships in small startups for 1 year approx, and then 1+ year working as a full-time Android dev. So this was the part why I think my information that I'll share will be helpful to you guys. ठीक है तो just coming on to the part, so how generally do we learn any development stack? So for beginners, I'll say we start off with tutorials, and then we have courses also, Udemy, etc. Intermediate ones go to tutorial and tech blogs like Medium. Expert and legend is the part to pay attention here. We use blogs, once again Medium can be one, or Mindocs, etc., any informative blog. And then we have Stack Overflow. The reason I've mentioned Stack Overflow as a learning part because is we generally, what experienced people do is we generally go for a specific use case to Stack Overflow. Like we might have to show notification, so that is how we get to know about a lot of concepts in Android once we are into development and all. So there's a flow chart about the same tutorials that we follow. We make the same project. So this is commonly done by freshers a lot. We make the same project line by line exactly, even if we understand and write the code, and then we have project completion. So at this stage, we have full knowledge about implementation details. We don't have any in-depth understanding because we didn't spend any time actually understanding how things work. So what according to me are we missing out? So whenever we start, we should have a why factor in the equation. Like I'll say example of architecture patterns. So we have MVVM, but we also have MVC, MVP, and MVI. I'll have more infos about these in the next slides. But another alternative is flow over live data. Flow is the new thing now. Room DB over SQLite, coroutines over async task. So what we generally miss out is, or even freshers or even experienced developers is, we directly jump onto the fresher alternative. Let us say MVVM. So we actually miss out on why was there MVC in picture, why was there MVP, or even now MVI is comparatively new. So why are they in the picture as compared to other options? So solution for this is, like, before we directly jump onto implementation using the best method out there, we should take a little time to read like what is this a replacement for. Example, I'll tell you, like we had async task before, and the day coroutines was marked stable release from Google, then async task was deprecated. It also mentions in the documentation, I forgot to attach the screenshot here, but if you search async task and open the Android developer documentation, you will see that coroutines is the new way of doing asynchronous programming in Java or Kotlin. And then we also, in number of cases, we are working on legacy projects that were made a while ago, and back then they were made async task or RxJava was the best alternative. So that is why I think whenever we learn something new, we should also take a little bit of time out to figure out what were we using before this. Example is, once again, if we are using MVVM, we should figure out why aren't we using MVC or MVP or MVI. If we are using flow, we should know like what is the use case over live data or mutable live data for that sake, and then room DB over SQLite. So these are merely improvements. These were made to make our lives easier as a developer. We all know there's a lot less of boilerplate code in room DB as compared to SQLite. We have just divided the responsibility into implementations, database class, entities, and our DAO, which contains the implementation about the functions. So coming on to the next part, so it is about architectural patterns in Android. So this is a snippet from developers.android.com, and here we have how should we like differentiate between the layers of our application. So why do we need architectural patterns? The what here it written to structure the project code and to give it a modular design. Modular basically means separated code paths, and architecture patterns are applicable to separate the concerns. So what this bold keyword signifies is my UI layer should only deal with the responsibilities that is related to UI. Domain layer should only deal with the responsibilities like business logics. Like in case you're getting an array and you just have to show one object, that can be a part of your domain layer. And data layer is your model class, as we say, where we keep the data or we get the data from. Now, examples of these architectural patterns are MVVM, model view model. M and V are common for each architectural pattern. The difference is the last keyword. So here it is view model. Next we have MVP, that's presenter. MVC is controller, and MVI is model view intent. So just little bit information about MVI since it is relatively new. So I here stands for intent. It is not the intent that we use in Android like generally. Intent is something that we use to fire if we have to go from screen A to screen B. For example, there are also types of implicit and explicit. Intent here signifies the user action. Basically, intent here can be clicking of a button, and what do we have to load in that. So here also we have view model that handles all those code, but today we will be discussing MVVM in detail. So in case anyone has any question as of now, so you guys can ask. Hanji. UI layer is your activity or fragment or custom view as per your use case. Domain layer is your view model, I'll say. We don't generally implement it as optional because most of the time we skip that. And data layer is your model class. So that is where your repository and everything comes into picture. Hanji, in the data layer. So basically data layer gives us the data, domain layer does our processing in case we need any, and UI layer is just responsible for displaying the data. It shouldn't perform any logics like if else, etc. Cool. Any other questions? ठीक है. So if anyone else has a question, they can ask, or else we'll be proceeding. Cool. So ठीक है. So coming on to the discussion that I just told you about all four of these, and the key difference between them is I give you a little bit introduction about MVI. MVI is the one on the right. So user interaction is your intent, and how we respond to that is handled by view model. It gets the data from model and returns the data. So view is here, and MVVM, the preferred that we have right now is here. You can see MVV view model has no clue or no linkage to the view layer. Only view is getting the data from view model, and view model has a two-way communication with model class. That means it can add CRUD operations that we generally have: create, remove, update, and delete. It can add etc. in the model class, but it can only return the fetch data to the view. So these linkings are important to understand the use cases. So all three have different functionalities: the view, view model, and model. And for MVI, the view model and model are a grouped entity. It can be in this case also. Just the interaction between the view is different in both of them. And for MVC and MVP is present in this case. For MVP, model view and presenter. View is your UI, presenter is your logics, and model is your data classes, I'll say. Response whatever you are getting, local or remote. So here it has two-way coupling to both of these. That means presenter is also aware about the view that we need to render, and model is a close coupling anyway. For controller, it is the same way. We have the view and the controller is aware of what it needs to modify, and then it's a simple fetch from the model class. To check it. And the reason for using MVVM over others, now I know like once I started applying for job switch, every single job description had view model, MVVM in that mentioned. So the catch here, why it is unique is your view model. And according to developers.android.com, view model is an object that provides data for UI components and survive configuration changes. This is the most important part. Why we use MVVM over anything else. So I have a list of things why everyone is all in on view model. So it was introduced to handle memory leaks and lifecycle changes. I do have in-depth demo written in my Android Studio where I'll show you how it survives lifecycle changes. So the view model object survives the orientation changes and the object remains intact in case of orientation change. Orientation change, coming to configuration change. Configuration change can be switching the orientation of your device, portrait to landscape. So in that case, the whole activity or fragment that you were in reloads. That is, all those lifecycle methods are called once again, and that is when we lose all of our data. So I guess you guys should have also heard, like, we shouldn't pass any variable to constructor of a fragment. That is, and also a lot of question that is commonly asked, like, why shouldn't we pass a constructor variable or data variable in constructor of a fragment? In case of a fragment, when we have orientation changes or configuration changes for that matter, fragment loads its default constructor. No matter how many fields you provide in the constructor to make your job easy as bundles, etc., it will reload the fragment using the default only, and you will lose all of the data that you were supposed to show. So once again, that was just explaining about orientation change. And we also have state handled. So this is the, I'll say this is a state object that we use in order to keep a track of which state was my screen currently in. So it also, if we add that in our view model, it will also survive process Z. I have more details in the later slides. So just to recap, why we use MVVM over others is the basic catch here is view model. And view model is something that gives us data for UI components and it survives configuration changes. And reasons are handles memory leak, lifecycle changes. How it does that, I have more details on that. So it survive orientation change, remains intact, and adding state checks will make our lives easier if we have to survive process death. So yep, that is the case I was talking about. In case of a rotation event. So these screenshots are taken from developers.android.com YouTube channel. They had a official video about view model. So yeah, in case of you have an activity instance, you had the data changed to it, you had a rotation event and it gets recreated. That means on start, on create, all those functions are called once again, and whatever you had in global or local scope is destroyed. Like, you can't get it back, gets collected by the garbage collector. So in order to handle these specific kinds of bugs, we attach a view model. So if we had activity already running, we had a rotation event, we come back to the activity gets reinitialized and it will get the same view model object that was already there. So we don't actually lose any data. Data now is a part of view model, not the activity itself. So yeah, why do we, once again, another slide just justifying why do we need view models? In case we do everything without view models, so our activity or fragment will do all of these. It will process the data, it will draw the UI, render the UI, set content view. It will make the API calls, it will save and restore the UI using state cases, and it will handle all the click listeners and interaction that we have. So what's wrong in this? So it violates single responsibility principle. So this is a high level stuff, but generally we have solid. So single, each class should have a single responsibility. But here you can see your activity is already doing 5 things. So in order to reduce that, we need view models in the picture or presenter or controller, anything that's a wrapper. And it makes it difficult to maintain the application. If you make any changes in the data loading, you have to change all of these because these are interdependent. So preferred method that we should use is activity should only be responsible for loading the UI, should be responsible for receiving user interaction on click, on long press, etc. View model should hold the UI data, repository should get the data from API, local or remote. Presenter layer, once again, presenter and domain layers are, I'll say, optional. But these 3 things are compulsory to have in order to make a scalable application: activity, view model, and repository. So this is the preferred method. So we have divided responsibility according to class type. I've made sure activity just handles UI, view models handles the data, repository gives me the data which view model contains. And this increases number of entities in the picture. Right now we have 3, if we even include presenter and more domain, etc., whatever we can include. But this makes our code much more clean and much more maintainable. So yep. Before that, anyone, once again, any questions, anyone? But there's a lot of noise from your end, bro. Like, can you please, I guess, type your question in the chat? I'm having a look. हाँ, so yeah, that's a valid point that any of these architectures are just a suggestion from Google's end, like what you can do. And we can actually, depending on our use case, we can also have model view without in view model, but just a specific use case of having view model saves a lot of pain when we are debugging bugs. Yep. Deepak asks, can you brief more about presenter? Cool. So basically, presenter is the layer where we process the data. I'll say processing means like, as I gave an example before, let us suppose you are getting an array of objects, but you have to perform some logics like if else, like checking if they contain a key or not. So these are the cases that can be handled by presenter, but usually people do it in view models because then it will increase the number of classes in our application. So to save the time, we increase the code of view model by a whole lot in order to save creating presenter and domain layers for that. Any other question, anyone? ठीक है, I guess not. So yeah, let's come back. हाँ जी. हम्म. अच्छा, इन केस ऑफ इंटरेक्शंस, ठीक है. तो बेसिकली जब आप रिपोजिटरी से डेटा लाते हो तो योर प्रेजेंटर विल बी बिटवीन व्यू मॉडल एंड रिपोजिटरी. रीजन फॉर दिस इज कि व्यू मॉडल सिर्फ उस स्टेट को होल्ड करना चाहिए जो उसके लिए यूजफुल है, मतलब एक्टिविटी के लिए. तो व्यू मॉडल में जब हम बिजनेस लॉजिक हटाना चाहते हैं, लेटस इफ एल्स वाली चीज है, फॉर लेटस से कि अगर मेरे पास एक क्लास आ रही है उसमें एक बुलियन है ट्रू, लेटस से फ्लैग, एंड मेरी रिक्वायरमेंट है कि सिर्फ ट्रू वाले ऑब्जेक्ट दिखने चाहिए एक्टिविटी में. तो rather than doing that processing in view model, I can add a presenter between view model and repository. तो उस केस में यार आपका सिंगल रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी प्रिंसिपल अवॉइड हो गया, मतलब वो हो गया ना, वायलेट हो गया, क्योंकि आपका व्यू सिर्फ लोड नहीं कर रहा है चीजों को, वो हैंडल भी कर रहा है उसकी प्रोसेसिंग को. तो उस चीज में, हाँ, तो आपका सिंगल रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी अगर प्रिंसिपल, इसलिए मैंने कहा प्रेजेंटर या फिर डोमेन लेयर जैसे भी हम इसको कहें, इज एन ऑप्शनल जो व्यू मॉडल और रिपोजिटरी के बीच में आता है. मैं सारा लॉजिक व्यू मॉडल में भी लिख सकता हूँ, बट काफी प्रोजेक्ट्स होते हैं जिसमें व्यू मॉडल ही 10,000 लाइंस का बन जाता है. पहले आप म्यूटेबल लाइव डेटास बनाओगे, फिर उनके ऊपर गेटर बनाओगे, फिर आप एपीआई से रिस्पॉन्स लाओगे और उस एपीआई के रिस्पॉन्स को फिर फॉर्मेट करोगे, तो एक ही चीज के 5 फंक्शंस हो गए. वो ये एक रिस्पॉन्स को हैंडल करने के लिए 5 चाहिए हमें. ऐसे ही अगर उस चीज को कम करनी है ना, कि अगर हम एक अलग से प्रेजेंटर बना दे जो बेसिकली एपीआई रिस्पॉन्स लेगा और फॉर्मेट करके हमें दे देगा, तो इस, हाँ, तो इससे स्केलेबिलिटी बढ़ती है बेसिकली. हाँ हाँ. हाँ, वो सारी डेटा लॉजिक्स जो हैंडल करनी है वो सारा प्रेजेंटर पे रहना चाहिए फॉर दैट. ठीक है, एनीवन एल्स? हाँ जी. हाँ जी. हाँ जी। हाँ जी। हाँ, कस्टम बन सकता है, बस प्रॉब्लम उस केस में ये आती है कि जब आप, लेट मी कम बैक टू एमवीपी की बात कर रहे हैं ना, प्रेजेंटर व्यू मॉडल का सबसे बड़ा यूज केस ही है, उसे पता है कि आया हुआ डेटा कब आगे भेजना है और कब नहीं भेजना है। लाइफ साइकिल अवेयर का मतलब बेसिकली मोर डिटेल्स है नीचे, बट जो आपकी एक्टिविटी के कॉल बैक्स होते हैं, ऑन क्रिएट, ऑन स्टार्ट, सारे जो भी होते हैं, तो व्यू मॉडल इज अवेयर। अब आपके केस में क्या होगा, वो प्रेजेंटर से लाइव डेटा से ऑब्जेक्ट व्यू में आ जाएगा, बट उसकी नीड वहां पे है नहीं। तो बेसिकली आप अपने सिस्टम का प्रोसेसिंग बढ़ा रहे हो सकता है, बट इसी यूज केस को एनकाउंटर करने के लिए व्यू मॉडल आया था पिक्चर में। एंड उसका इम्प्लीमेंटेशन डिटेल भी है, आई हैव कोड इन एंड्रॉइड स्टूडियो, जिससे और क्लियर होगा। बस हाँ, इसका मोर डिटेल में आंसर आ, अभी आगे जब आप कोड देखोगे तो आई शो यू एग्जैक्टली कि उसे कैसे पता लगता है कि अब मुझे अपडेट करना है नहीं करना है। ठीक है, हाँ, आई जस्ट गिव यू अ स्मॉल आंसर फॉर दैट। लेट मी जस्ट ओपन माय स्टूडियो फॉर क्लियर एक्सप्लेनेशन। तो लेट अस सपोज दिस प्रोजेक्ट, आई जस्ट क्लोज दिस। कूल है। तो कीपिंग एवरीथिंग आउट ऑफ द पिक्चर, आई जस्ट हैव अ व्यू मॉडल, और मेरे पास एक एक्टिविटी है फॉर एग्जांपल। तो उस केस में आप क्या क्रिएट करोगे, वट एवर यू मेक योर क्लास ना, लेटर से आपने अभी ये लोकल है, ग्लोबल भी रख सकते हैं, आप अपना एक व्यू मॉडल बनाओगे, बट उसके लाइव डेटा के ऑब्जर्वर्स आप हटाओगे ऑन पॉज एंड ऑन स्टॉप के केस में, क्योंकि आप नहीं चाहते कि जब आपकी एक्टिविटी बैकग्राउंड में हो तो आप उसका डेटा ऑब्जर्व करो। यही एक चीज है जो व्यू मॉडल इंटरनली खुद हैंडल करता है। तो इन केस जैसा आपका क्वेश्चन था कि अगर कोई इंटरव्यू में पूछता है, अगर हमें व्यू मॉडल अपना चाहिए, तो हम कुछ नहीं करेंगे, जैसे यहाँ पे ऑब्जर्व लगा हुआ है, आई जस्ट गो अहेड। सेकेंड, अभी वो लोकल है मतलब ठीक है, बट व्यू मॉडल ऊपर ही दिखाता हूँ मैं। तो बेसिकली मैं सैंपल रिमूव ऑब्जर्वर है, सिंपल, एंड इसको जो भी पैरामीटर चाहिए मैं वो दे दूंगा। तो अब मैं उसको ऑब्जर्व नहीं कर रहा हूँ जब तक वो फोरग्राउंड में नहीं आएगा। तो जब फिर से वो ऑन स्टार्ट या ऑन रिज्यूम पे आता है, तब मैं उसे फिर से अटैच कर दूंगा, जैसे यहाँ पे अटैच कर रखा है। तो आप एक्चुअली खुद उसकी हैंडलिंग कर सकते हो चेंज। दिस इज समथिंग मैंने ट्राई नहीं किया, बट आई एम 100% श्योर चलेगा, बिकॉज हम ऑब्जर्वर्स किसी भी टाइम पे हटा सकते हैं और लगा सकते हैं। इस चीज को मैं फंक्शन बना सकता हूँ, और फिर मॉड्यूलैरिटी चाहिए तो हमेशा नल करना है, या फिर ये सीधा एक फंक्शन अटैच करना है, वो हमारा यूज केस है। ठीक है, हाँ, एनीथिंग एल्स? ठीक है, चलो विल प्रोसीड देन। तो मोर डिटेल्स हैं इस पे, लाइक द रीजन आई चोज दिस इज कि मैं एक्चुअल डिटेल आपको दिखा सकूं वर्किंग, कि हाउ इट एक्चुअली वर्क्स, cause that is asked a lot of in interviews, cause सारे प्रोजेक्ट्स आजकल व्यू मॉड एमवीवीएम पे बनते हैं, नो वन इज चूजिंग एमवीसी एक्सेप्ट। तो एज वी जस्ट मेंशनड कि ऑन सेव इंस्टेंट स्टेट की जरूरत क्या है, बहुत छोटी सी टेबल है, समिंग इट अप, आपका कॉन्फ़िगरेशन चेंज व्यू मॉडल सर्वाइव कर जाएगा, बट प्रोसेस डेथ नहीं कर पाता है। एंड जस्ट गूगलिंग इट अप टू मेक क्लैरिटी, प्रोसेस डेथ इन एंड्रॉइड। प्रोसेस डेथ इज लाइक, लेट अस सपोज, ठीक है, आई गिव यू मोर स्मॉल इंट्रो, नहीं तो इट विल गेट कंफ्यूजिंग। लेट अस सपोज आपकी ऐप बैकग्राउंड में थी, एंड सिस्टम की मेमोरी वाज रनिंग लो, तो आपको पता हो एंड्रॉइड से ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टम इज ऑप्टिमाइज इन सच ए वे, जिस चीज की जरूरत नहीं है वील रिमूव दैट, हर ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टम में होता है। तो इन दैट क्लियरिंग, इफ इट रिमूव्स द इंस्टेंस ऑफ योर एप्लीकेशन, तो दैट इज नोन एज प्रोसेस डेथ। उस केस में वी मॉडल का पुराना ऑब्जेक्ट वापस नहीं आता है, अगर आप स्टेट हैंडल यूज ना करो तो विल कम टू दैट स्टेट हैंडल से कैसे होता है। एंड डेटा कैपेसिटी की आप एक्चुअली स्टोर कर क्या सकते हो, अगर आप व्यू मॉडल यूज करते हो और आप सेव स्टेट इंस्टेंस यूज करते हो। हाँ जी। Cool, cool. Sure, sure. Sorry, my bad. Since your question was in Hindi, na, so I switched. Okay. So coming back to English. Thank you for the suggestion, bro. So view model and on instance save state. So basically, here's a difference. What view model can store and what our state can store in Android. So in case we just use view model, it will survive the configuration change. It will do what it was made for, but it won't survive process death. What is process death? A small example can be, let us say your device is consuming 15 GB out of the 16 GB RAM it has, and your application is in the background. So according to Android operating system, it is not a critical process that needs to be saved. It will just clear the cache. It will remove it from the stack recent applications that we see in case of high memory. That is known as process death. So in this case, the object of view model won't be saved. Like we won't get the same data once again. And coming to the second point, the data capacity. How much can we store in view model and how much can we store in state? View model can hold a lot of data. I've seen classes where view model is 10,000 line of code. So it is actually capable of holding a lot of data. For state, we need to save small amount of data, and this is the emergency use case. Let us say your activity got shut down due to process death. The next time it opens, you actually want to get key values out of it. Let us say user had entered an input, and you that is key to your API calls. So you just want to fetch that. And in this case, it requires serialization. Serialization is coming to serialization. Basically, every class that we write has to get stored in bytecode. So serialization is the process that does this, and we have to serialize that class. In case I make a data class or a normal class in Java or a data class in Kotlin, I have to tell it that I'll be using serialization because it has to get converted into byte class. In case if I don't do that, I'll lose the data because it's converting and reconverting back to normal. So that is what serialization is all about. And actually, what should we store? Now we know both of these alternative. So view model, we can store all the data for our activity and fragment UI. And for on state instance, we need to store only emergency data. Like as I said, user had entered a key, let us say a string, and you want to fetch the value. And yep, Anji, we are back on this. Mm-hmm. Store byte. It has at the end store has to be in bytes. Yep. ठीक है, I'll use ठीक है, तो coming for that in Hindi, I guess I'll try to use English ताकि दोनों चीजें समझ आए. So serialization is basically you have created a data class, and let me show it in Android Studio itself ताकि everyone understands. And I go ahead and create a data class. ठीक है, I'm creating a temp data class. It has nothing. Let me increase the size. ठीक है, I hope it is clearly visible. ठीक है, तो I'll go ahead and do val string is of type string. ठीक है, so the problem with this is we don't need the body in a data class, but the problem is agar if we have to save this class anywhere, it needs to get converted into bytecode. That is how compilation work. Like my main activity.java will convert into a build file. Since I don't have an active build, so I would have shown you. So serialization is I have to serialize this. Just give me a second. Removing this. यहाँ पे you'll go ahead and either we can use default. हाँ, so you can use this. So Parcelable is so this tells your class, and let me just show you the difference between these two is. Yep. So now your class is Parcelable. This means like basically whenever you will save this anywhere that it gets converted to bytecode now. If you write all these function correctly, so it will get converted into bytecode, and bytecode so you can retrieve the data that you had. अगर मैं इसको नहीं करता और मैं इसको सीधा सेव कर देता अभी इस मूवमेंट पे, तो आई वुड हैव लॉस्ट दिस फील्ड, क्योंकि वी डोंट नो ना हमें उसे सेव क्या करना है फॉर बाय आईडी। हाँ हाँ। हाँ जी। यप यप। हाँ ठीक है ठीक है, दैट इज द रीजन आई अंडरस्टैंड, क्योंकि दिस इज नॉट जस्ट योर प्रॉब्लम, ये होता है। जब फर्स्ट टाइम आई वाज रीडिंग इट तो मेरे को भी समझ नहीं आया। तो दिस इज द एग्जांपल, लेट अस से, तो वी आर जस्ट सेविंग समथिंग इन आवर स्टेट जो कि क्लास का टाइप है माय ऑब्जेक्ट, ठीक है। सो व्हाई डू वी नीड पार्सलेबल हियर? मतलब पार्सलेबल और सीरियलाइजेबल इज अ डिबेट कि हमें कौन सा चूज करना चाहिए। बट लेट अस सपोज अभी हम पार्सलेबल चूज करते हैं। दोनों केसेस में इट गेट्स कन्वर्टेड इनटू बाइट कोड, ताकि नेक्स्ट क्लास या जो भी है उसको समझ आए कि ये है क्या। When a class gets converted into bytecode, it loses its identity, मतलब my parsable नहीं रहेगा उसके पास कोई नॉलेज नहीं रहेगी, इट इज बाइट्स, जीरोस एंड वन में चलता है पूरा सिस्टम, राइट। तो पार्सलेबल इज जस्ट टेलिंग माई सिस्टम कि ठीक है, यू हैव टू राइट इट इनटू पार्सल एंड देन, तो बेसिकली व्हाट वी डू इज हम उसका एक ऑब्जेक्ट क्रिएट करते हैं। दिस इज बॉयलर क्रिएट कोड, ये खुद नहीं लिखना होता है, यू कैन जस्ट कॉपी पेस्ट इट, या फिर स्टूडियो भी खुद जनरेट कर देता है। तो बेसिकली पार्सलेबल इज कि इफ यू आर यूजिंग स्ट्रिंग एक्सेट्रा एनीथिंग, द डिफॉल्ट डेटा टाइप्स दैट वी हैव इन जावा और कॉटलिन, तो आप उसको सीधा सेव कर सकते हो स्टेट में, यू कैन सेव इट डायरेक्टली। बट हाँ, ये डेटा कंटेंट किस टाइप का है, हमें इस डेटा से करना क्या है, लाइक इधर यू कैन सी वी जस्ट हैव एम डेटा ऑब्जेक्ट, राइट। तो अगर मैं इसको डायरेक्टली सेव कर देता हूं तो इट विल लूज द आइडेंटिटी कि एम डेटा था मेरे पास। तो व्हेन आई रिट्रीव इट वो कन्वर्ट ही नहीं होगा, कन्वर्ट होगा तो इट विल लूज दिस पार्ट, उसे पता ही नहीं होगा व्हाट डू आई नीड टू सेव और व्हाट डू आई नीड टू रिमूव। हाँ जी, तो कमिंग बैक टू दिस, कोई नहीं। तो बेसिकली वी रिक्वायर सीरियलाइजेशन इन केस ऑफ कस्टम क्लास। आई विल जस्ट राइट इट फॉर custom classes. This is data class or anything. If you are using string etc, that's not an issue, we can go ahead with that. And emergency data to reload, ठीक है। Now coming to how view model works. Once again, this is an important question that's being asked. Since your projects are on view model, you should be aware of this. So let us see that example from an activity. As I mentioned, this is the callbacks of activity life cycle as we know them. So these are the states. Your activity gets launched, you create it, you start it. It's a resume function is also called. This is the case when we actually pause it, it goes to background and we come back to it. So we have resume here. Then we have on stop. That means that it's not visible to the user right now. After on stop also you can come back to the activity and it fires on restart and we go to on start. And in case of the process gets killed, this is your process killed and we come back to on create. So this is for both on process killed or orientation changes, your whole activity gets reinitiated. And then we have on destroy and activity shutdown is the case. When we know this is not a useful activity anymore, we don't need to come back to it. So here we have a view model in this picture. Now details about the view model. View model is lifecycle aware. What it is, I'll show you guys exactly. So it knows about current callback state of the activity. That means internally view model is written in such a way it knows if my activity is on create, on start, on resume, all of these methods. So what it actually does is how it actually utilizes this information, as someone asked. So in this case, if the activity of fragment is in background, it will not send the data to the activity of fragment. your observer will not get the data if it is in background or destroyed, let us for say for example. So reason for this is a smart move. This is to avoid memory leaks, etc. Memory leaks, since this might also be a new concept. Memory leaks is basically when your instance outlives the activity. Let us say application context outlives the single activity, because application context is for an application, activity context is for an activity. So view model at any given state knows. So for example, I made an API call. I'll show you guys that in code also. I made an API call in after my user was interacting with the screen. Now on result of that, and let us say it takes 5 seconds to fetch the data. So I navigate the user to another screen. Now in this case, view model will have the object resulted from the activity API call, and it will not send it to the view. Reason for this is because it's saving the computation. You don't need to render the UI. Like that API call will have some response. We will make some changes on user interface for that. So you don't need to actually render the UI in case the activity is not visible. So that is the key point here, that my view model at every given state of time knows which callback is my activity or fragment is, and do I need to send the data or not. And then you guys might be thinking that basically it has stopped the data from going ahead in case of background. What happens when it is in foreground? Once you come back to this, let us say you were on stop, you come back to on restart and it goes to on start. That is when the observer will pick the data from view model. That is when it will emit the data using live data. And yep, any questions? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. हाँ तो इस केस में basically it won't render. I'll show you guys कि how it actually works with view model and without view model. And इससे the benefits of this is basically you are saving computational power. Let us say you had to load a recycler view on that response of API. So if your screen is not visible, what's the point of loading the recycler view? So that is how view model saves the day for us. And any other questions? Cool. So basically, view model is your object, and how it actually gets created is handled using view model provider. I'll show you the details in depth, how it actually, you know, how it actually works, how we create the object. I have the details in the next slide. I'll show you that. So use case for view model provider is, I told you guys na, that if a view model object already exists, we return the same one. So that is handled by view model provider. So we as developers I'll show you the code in a next few slides. So we as a developer tell view model provider to give us object of a view model, and then it checks internally whether we have an existing object or not. In case of existing, we'll just return that. If not, we'll create a new one. We clear the map after few seconds. On destroy something when we remove it. We don't. We just come back to the same screen now. And there's a buffer time of few milliseconds before clearing the view model object. I'll just show you in code details. I also have snippet from official view model classes written by Android. So we'll come back to the exact details in a minute. Any other question, anyone? So in case of on cleared is an internal method that is handled by view model. So it survives the orientation, and that is when you go into the on cleared is when your activity is finished after on destroy, because this is life cycle of an activity. If we just club in life cycle of a view model, I can also open it in the, let me just open it in the next tab. Cycle of view model. Cool. Huh, that is what I'm telling you. The view model scope basically outlives your activity. So outlives means that even if your activity is destroyed, view model scope is something that will be called once it is destroyed. And in case of rotated, an all cleared is called when it is finished. Like in case of rotated, you can see you go on, pause, on, stop, on, destroy, and you have the whole cycle once again. This on create starts once again in case of orientation change. No, 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 no. It is killed when your activity is finished. There is a difference between your activity just reloading and your activity actually going out of scope and getting cleared. Let us say you have an use case where your activity has been removed from stack. Let me try to give you an example. Basically, you have exited the application, or let us say you finished your current activity and came back to the previous one. So that is the case when you're telling Android. Uh-huh. Your activity doesn't get destroyed when you go from A to B, right? It is in the stack. We have a stack of activities or fragment, however we use it. So I'll show you it in code when I'm running it on Studio. It actually stops. So it goes on to on stop and it waits because it is still in the stack. You can come back to the activity. And if you want to destroy an activity, you can use finish. Like after you have launched the intent, use finish. So that basically tells Android activity stack that I won't be coming back to the screen. That is when on cleared is triggered that you have finished, like you have cleared the activity. You don't need it in future. It outlives. View model outlives activity of fragment, whatever we are using. So, okay, we'll come back to more details and any, yep, yep. So live data is just an observer pattern. So there are two or three patterns that we use in computer science. One is observer, second is publisher subscriber, pub sub as we call it. So live data is part observer. We can use, you can directly return the data, and once again, as I mentioned, using live data actually makes your operation smart. You can do view model without live data. That's not an issue. But in that case, if you just call a function and return that value, so where will you store that? Live data is the one that stores it for you, right? In case it gets deleted. So in order to make that whole creating a variable, saving it in the variable, then returning the variable, we can directly use live data to store the data for future references. It is just to make life easy. We can have a custom view model. We can use, even we can use flow, live data, anything that suits our use case. Hmm. We can skip that. View model, हाँ, आप लाइव डेटा भी हटा के यू कैन कीप अ वेरिएबल, मतलब आई कैन शो यू इन द स्टूडियो ऑल्सो, आप वेरिएबल रखो, वी कैन रिमूव दैट लाइव डेटा इन पिक्चर एंड जस्ट यूज रिटर्निंग थ्रू दैट वेरिएबल. तो just the problem will be it won't be smart anymore. Like view model will return the variable even if it is the background state. To skip that we need this. हाँ, go ahead, go ahead. Observer pattern. Because as I just told you ना कि observer है, like whenever we write code for live data to check what's happening, you see this here, right? We are using observe. So it is an observer pattern, and I'm telling this ki let's observe this variable, live data variable in this class. So we are observing. So it is observer pattern. Other patterns are pub sub, publisher, subscriber, but that is what we don't use in MVVM because it will make a whole lot of mess. So it is based on observer pattern. Cool. Any more questions, guys? Hal- Hmm. Mhm. No, it's not. You are replacing the fragment. ठीक है, and in that case, in case you don't have backstack configured to come back to the previous one, like it is still possible to come back to the previous fragment using backstack dispatchers that we have inbuilt. ठीक है, हाँ, तो thank you for the answer, Ajay. And in that case, it gets cleared, but after the fragment has been detached, like coming to this, after on destroy, it will get cleared. In case you are not coming back to that, once again, it totally depends whether you are replacing or adding it. हाँ, maintaining the backstack so it won't get cleared now, because maintaining backstack means that you can come back to the previous fragment. You have, yep. On destroy will be called, but according to, let us say, fragment stack that is maintained by Android, it knows that there is a waypoint, there is a navigation in which you can come back from your fragment to the previous fragment. So that is, I understand. So the clear example I'll give you is like, let us say I told you about activity, we have finished, right? So using this function in activity tells your Android, let us say compiler, I'll say, it tells Android that I won't be coming back to this screen, right? So in your case, what will happen is it will go into on destroy, but according to Android, there is a way where you can come back from fragment B to fragment A, right? You are maintaining the backstack. So that is when your view model will outlive your fragment because there is a possible navigation. I understand. So like there are a lot of cases when we have questions about view model. So for everyone in the meeting, I'll give you a small suggestion. Like even if you ask someone, like if you are asking me this question, so it is very less possibility that I might have actually solved the same one. So preferred way of doing these questions is like create a fragment for yourself, and like I have did here, just I'll show you. I have overridden all the methods that we have, right? For activity, lifecycle methods. So you can use logcat and actually figure out what's the stack, how it is actually happening. So once again, there are a lot of questions like what happens when you go from activity A to B, what happens when you reload the activity, what happens when you go to the recent app and come back to this activity. So life cycle questions are a bit tricky, but In your case, in order to answer your question, it will outlive the fragment if there is a way to come back to the previous one. No, it happens on create. We load the view on create view ना, तो the thing is कि activity is visible, मतलब वो दिखेगा but your layout won't be visible because हम generally क्या we set the layout in on create. ठीक है, तो before this let us suppose there's a white canvas. If I remove this, हाँ हाँ, go on. We can resume but ये layout दिखेगा नहीं ना before on create. That is what I'm trying to. On start में code आएगा. I agree with you. पहले on start loads. But if where मतलब this is the code ना where you tell कि कौन सी XML लोड करनी है. तो answer ठीक है, तो basically you are saying कि that XML is loaded on start on interaction happen only after on create. ठीक है, might be true, can't deny that, have never deep dive. Rajesh, you have a lot of noise in your background, bro. हाँ, it is audible now. ठीक ठीक है, might be correct. ठीक है, थैंक यू. हाँ जी, thank you for adding on the detail, Deepak. Was because this is something a use case that I've never encountered, so that is why I was not clear about the answer for that. Cool है, तो ठीक है. Any other question, guys? Someone was speaking in between. हाँ, you guys, ठीक है. हाँ, on resume tells whether it's in foreground or not. I'm not saying it's incorrect because I just mentioned na this is a use case that I've never come across or debugged in depth. So the reason I'm able to tell about view model in depth is because I've experimented with it. So this is something that I learned new today, and thank you Deepak and everyone else for pointing that out. Cool. Any other questions? or I think we can proceed. Cool. So coming to the implementation details. So first we have a view model class, and then we have view model factory in picture. View model factory is needed when you want to provide construct variables to your constructor. Without that, we don't need that. And then we have model classes. That is where your data will come from. Can be local, room, DB, remote is repository for servers, etc. And now coming to the code snippets, this is how your sample view model looks like. I do have it in my Android Studio. We'll just show you in a minute. So it is written in Kotlin. I do have sample for Java as well. So it just extends view model class. It has the live data. And as someone was saying, mutable live data and live data. So the reason why I've created a getter over our live data is mutable live data. The reason for that is I don't want my activity or fragment to modify the live data. So I don't want to expose a mutable live data to that. It is a good practice. In case your activity or fragment is not modifying this live data, just create a getter over that is of type live data. So internally for this view model, I'll use underscore sample live data. That is a mutable live data. My view model can edit this, and my activity will just use get sample live data. So it doesn't know about a mutable live data. It only knows and cares about a live data object. And for object creation, it is quite simple. As someone also asked, why what is view model provider? We'll get into more details. So that is how we do using view model provider by ourselves. Create a view model, tell the type, use view model provider, give the context, and get using your view model class. How it works? This is actually view model provider is the most important part. It is the actual reason how view model survives the deletion of data, how it is maintained. And in case you are using delegates, you just have to implement this in your build or Gradle. And delegates is you don't actually have to handle this creation yourself. You can use by view models. By is Kotlin delegates. You can do a little bit research on that. It is just an alternative for late init. And once again, it is due to handle memory leaks, etc. So not going into much details. So you can just use view models here. In case you don't have a factory, it is this simple. In case you have a factory, then the process is a little bit complex, nothing else. You have to create the object of factory. So, and as I said, so remember, this is my, is anyone saying something? There's a mic on. तो we can देखो the thing is like the reason for this session was to keep it as simple as possible. If I include hilt in this, the code gets reduced into a single line, but the problem is you guys won't be able to understand because hilt is a bit advanced topic, I'll say, for Android developers. So hilt can also be used for this, and it is specifically a very nice add-on to creating objects, etc. So coming back to this, my view model has a get sample live data, and observing it is as simple as this. Just type in your view model object dot the thing you want to observe dot observe, give this the scope of your activity. I'll say this tells that which activity or fragment am I in. This is the context basically. And then whatever you have to do with the data can be done in the lambda here. I do have code for Java and Kotlin both in the sample. We'll come to that. Yep. So this is the most important part about view models. How exactly this line of code creates a view model object. So we go to the view model provider. There in the this is snippet taken from the official documentation, official source code from Android SDK that we have. So here you can see we have a store. It is of the type view model store. This is the important part that we want to focus on. And coming to the view model store. So at its Hanji. Sure, sure, no problem. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hanji. ठीक। हाँ, तो the reason for उसके the error that you will get without using the actual keyword get is, I'll just show you. बहुत सिंपल है. This is the concept of getters and setters जो जावा में होता था. तो अभी it's able to create, but the reason what why we want to specify it is because it is a getter. Get is nothing but your getter that we had in Java. Na? Remember, Java class has getters and setters that we have to create explicitly. So this, you can remove this. Ha, yeah, this is just for readability that it is a getter. And once again, we just want to observe the value in our activity. We don't want to change it. So that is why I've used a getter over this. हाँ, getter नहीं लगाओ. देखो, getter नहीं लगाओगे तो anyway you have told that it has to be of the type live data. तो it is converting, right? You are able to convert, and the reason we are adding it is just to increase the readability. So I can have a simple getter to increase the readability. The studio, right? हाँ जी. Yep. हाँ जी, just an add on that it has to be a case with the state flow. So we need to add it in. Not for, it's not a problem for live data. We get a problem if you are using state flow. Once again, the reason for using live data was to keep it simple. But next time onwards, I'll also have details about the little complex topics. Cool. So, go on. Mhm. So, as I just mentioned, that someone asked the question about stacks that you are going for fragment A to B. View model gets cleared when the view model is sure that you are not coming back to the activity. How we determine that is by the use of finish method. So when you are finishing your activity, finish means basically you are telling that let's exit the activity. In case I'll need this activity, I'll create the variable once again. I'll fire the intent or whatever do I have to do. So in the case of finish, it gets destroyed. And in case we don't finish it, in case it is on destroy, then it outlives the scope, because in that case it will be sustained by your Android because there's a possible navigation. You can come back to that screen, and that is when you'll need your view model object that was already existing. ठीक है. Any other question, guys? When we go, I'm having a look. Is it fine to use same view model in more than one activity? Best one model per fragment. So yeah, this is the case of shared view model. That is when you want to actually share some data, and it is not generally preferred. But in case you have to use the same, I'll say, data types, or as we have mentioned here, there's a official mention in that shared data between fragments. So you can use a view model in both of these, and you can use observers to just check out the data. But that is when you have to actually use the same, I'll say, the same object. We have to use the same live data class or object, I'll say. So you can use it, but depends on your use case. If it's not required to share two things, you shouldn't, because single responsibility principle will get avoided. So better to not do that. But in case there's a case, you can go ahead and share that. Sir, in that case, one should create I'll say, in case it is uncommon, you should create new view model. Reason for this is, in case we are using shared view model, we actually chain that view model to the activities lifecycle, not to the fragments. So that is the problem. So your activity view model will end up containing a whole lot of data that is not even related to all the fragments that you have. So in that case, I'll prefer is you can keep the common ones in case there's a lot of common things in your shared view model. In case there's not, create separate view models. That's the best case scenario, because when using a shared view model, it is chained to your activities lifecycle, not to your fragment lifecycle. And Deepak, go on. Mhm. 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 हाँ जी. So, I understand your question. So basically, you are saying that you will be emitting a type of data generic star, and then according to that use case, you will observe it. After observing your check, you will check out key which type it belongs to and what needs to be done. So it is right, but it is violating your solid. Remember, single responsibility. You can use any, like as Amit has suggested, you can use any, but that creates a complexity in your view class. We need to find out the type of the class that you are getting, right? So, आई अंडरस्टैंड योर कंसर्न. तो आप बेसिकली ये कह रहे हो कि मैं जेनरिक टाइप भेजूंगा और यहाँ आई चेक कि कौन से टाइप का और क्या करना है ना. रिसोर्स डॉट, हाँ. तो इन दैट केस द प्रॉब्लम इज, तो बेसिकली इन योर व्यू क्लास, लेट अस से योर एक्टिविटी, यू विल हैव टू चेक ना कि कौन से टाइप का ऑब्जेक्ट है. तो इट इज अ कॉम्प्लेक्स, इट इज परफॉर्मिंग बिजनेस लॉजिक इन योर व्यू क्लास, दैट इज नॉट एडवाइजेबल. लाइक लिख सकते हो, यू कैन राइट दिस कोड and 99% it won't affect anything. But once you are understanding about model view and view model, so actually your view is not just loading the UI, it is doing business logic checks. So that shouldn't be the case. If a class is a view type, so it should just concerned about loading the data, loading or remove or hiding, whatever is the case. It shouldn't be concerned about, okay, what type of data am I getting, what do I need to do with this. Mhm. हाँ, यू कैन, वही चीज है, आप ऑलरेडी थोड़ा बहुत बिजनेस लॉजिक लिख रहे हो, यू कैन इंक्लूड दैट ऑल्सो, बट अकॉर्डिंग टू द प्रेफर्ड आर्किटेक्चर ना, दिस शुड बी हैंडल्ड बाय व्यू मॉडल. तो इस केस में व्हाट यू शुड, मतलब बेस्ट अप्रोच दैट आई कैन थिंक ऑफ, क्रिएट टू सेपरेट लाइव डेटा, वन फॉर सक्सेस, वन फॉर फेलियर. ऑब्जर्वर्स. हाँ, यू कैन शिफ्ट दैट लॉजिक कंप्लीटली टू व्यू मॉडल, और वो प्रेफर्ड है. रीजन बीइंग योर व्यू शुड बी एज क्लियर एज पॉसिबल इन. हाँ, at the end it comes down to that. Thank you, Anup, for adding that. And Om Kurana is asking, in dynamic feature delivery using clean architecture, shall every model has its data layer or a common data layer? Yeah, for dynamic feature delivery, I'll say go with every individual data layer. Reason is there has to be a specific use case when you'll use dynamic feature delivery. Like, once again, for everyone in the meeting, that's a bit advanced topic. I'll say not bit, a lot advanced topic. So in that case means, like, let us say we have 5 fragments and we want to only import the ones that we need at the specific moment, or modules, I'll say, not fragments. So why do you want to keep data class of a module that is not required by your application? So my suggestion will be in that case, once again, I'm not worked on this and no context about dynamic feature delivery, but we should have individual. Else your common layer, data layer will have a whole lot of lines of code. Mm-hmm. हाँ, नहीं तो can be common, but that, just once again, as you said, it comes down to your use case. If each of your individual feature is fetching data of different type, go for individual ones. If they have a common anything that's common, then you can use a common data lake. ठीक है. And हाँ, so coming back to this, how view models are actually created. So here the most important part to look is view model store, and we were on this one. So at the lowest level, this is once again from Android documentation. At the lowest level, view model store contains a hash map of string versus a view model object. And as a lot of us would have used in data structures, hash map is used to check whether something exists or not. So in this case, it basically gets the old view model from the, I'll say, hash map using your key. And how do we define this key? It is model class dot canonical name. So for your view model, a canonical name is generated. So we'll basically check, okay, we are adding a new, let me say, yep. So basically the get is the one that's most important to us. So we just get a part of, get the ViewModel object from the hash map, whether it exists or not, and how it is determined using your canonical name for the class. So in case it doesn't exist, we create one and we put it back in the ViewModel. It, it is done by ViewModel store. So ViewModel store handles this, and ViewModel store is one of the constructor in ViewModel factory. Sorry, ViewModel provider. ठीक है, once again, so basically at its lowest, the object creation is controlled by view model store for a view model, and in depth what it actually does is it contains a hash map of string versus view model. So very simple, if you come back, you create a new object using any of these methods. We use view model provider and it comes to, let us say, view model store to check. So basically it checks the canonical name of your class, and if it finds a view model already existing in the hash map for that string, it returns that. And if it is null, it basically creates a new one and it puts it in the hash map for future uses. This is the actual answer for a lot of questions that are asked in the interview, how actually view model is able to survive orientation change. So basically your activity gets recreated, but once your, let us say, come to this, first time it is getting created, so we'll create a new object, view model store will create a new object and store it in the hash map, right? So once you come again for on create and you make the call to find out the view model object, it will tell you that there's an object which already exists. So it will not create a new object, it will return the original existing one, and that is how your whole data survives the change. So this is the most important part, that is, once again I'm repeating, asked in a lot of interviews. It was also asked from me in a lot of interviews, how exactly it survives. So the answer for that comes down to your view model store. It contains a hash map which handles all the state, creating a new one or returning the old one. And remember, since it is chained to a fragment or activity, that is where we call it from. So it is retained as long as the scope is alive. That is, once again, if someone asks, like, how we decide when we have to clear it. If an activity it is if an activity is finished or the process is killed, then my garbage collector know that this activity is no longer needed and it will clear the object from view model. You have the option of clear, right? So internal storage knows and it notifies the view model store that okay, this class has been removed, garbage collector has collected it, it's no longer uses. So just go on and clear that. So that is how it actually works in detail, and this is the most important part of the talk that I gave. And now coming back to the implementation, I'll say, okay. So as of now, this code is not on GitHub. I'll share it in a file. So basically, I have two activities, one in Kotlin, one in Java, to show both the usage for view model creation in both of these. Give me a second. Cool. So here you can see the creation of view model. Is someone saying something? Cool, I guess not. Like in case if someone was, you can re-ask. The creation of ViewModel is the same, just the syntax is different. We need a new keyword in Java, not in Kotlin. So, the use case that I told you guys, that how actually it survives. Coming on to that, give me a second. To giving you a little bit of intro. Since there are two activities, there are two different view models that I've created. So I'll split the code, and basically what my view model is doing is, this is a simple function. It is emitting a value after a delay of 2 seconds in case of my Java class, and then it is sending a value using my live data. And for my first activity that we are going from main activity Kotlin to main activity Java. Just to clear any confusions, here is a simple intent. So for my Kotlin one, I'm getting the value after 2.5 seconds, and I'm sending this debug information that what it actually needs to print. So coming to my activity, this is quite simple. I'm launching, since this is a delay, it has to be a suspend function, and I'm launching it from the lifecycle scope. You guys can understand a little bit about more in details. It will require a little bit of googling from your end. Global scope, lifecycle scope, and coroutine scope that we have in our application. So I'm launching this for lifecycle scope. It means that it will be chained to this activity, and I'm launching this sample string, and I'll do this. Cool. So yeah, so I'm basically launching this function and it will return me the value after 2.5 seconds. And before even I've set the observer, and after that I'm basically navigating to my other screen. So let me go. Mhm. So you can't run a suspend function. So it is, I guess I hope my voice is audible, right? Okay, so basically it is a suspend function. Suspend is a concept of coroutine. So suspend function can't be launched from a normal function. So it is telling you that it should be launched from another a coroutine or another suspend function, and you can't change the signature of this on create, right? It is an override. Suspend function needs to be launched from a coroutine. Same thing. So I'll open the logcat for you guys. Let me just open this. Check it. And I'll remove all the info. Cool. So once again to clarify, Abhi as of now I'm launching the function in my view model. I have another function that is using just the activity. I'll show you the difference, how view model actually works, handles the data sending part. And let me go ahead and run this. It will pick it up automatically, I guess. Cool. So yep. So basically here you can see, I'll come back to the function here. This was the string that was supposed to be emitted after 2.5 seconds, right? And as of now, the duration is much more than 2.5 seconds. But we are only seeing the value that is sent by second activity is view model. Reason for this is since my activity is not in foreground, view model won't emit that data. So in this case, my main activity, sorry, view model Kotlin is not actually emitting this data to this live data object. So let us, and the case once again, if I have to come back, I just press the back, here you can see I got the string, right? It is the same value. I didn't had to call the function once again. But now since I'm on this screen, I can use this value. So this is how actually view model works. As I told you earlier, it knows which callback state your activity is in and whether it can use the data that you'll be sending or not. Okay, I hope this example is clear. Anyone has any questions related to this? Okay, so this is the key part. And let us say if I don't use view model, right? Let us just forget view model for say. And I say, okay, I don't even need the observer. I'll just comment the whole code out and I'll just load a simple suspend function from my activity. Now the difference for this case, let me just rerun the app. I'll clear the logcat to just show you guys. Okay. So you can see we are getting this string, right? Even if I'll just zoom in, sorry for the low thing. So basically the XML difference is Java activity, the second activity that we are loading after intent has Java activity written on the first one is Kotlin activity. Here you can see I have gotten the result from the second screen, the view model in the second screen, but even after that I'm getting the result from the first one. Now, is there any benefit of getting this result? It's not there. I unnecessary we are using resources and had it been an API response, imagine if we had to redraw the whole canvas according to this, the whole XML layout. So that is the part, that is how view model actually saves our day in terms of handling all this. We can do this ourselves. We can, as you can see, it's going into on stop. So in on stop, you can create a class and remove the observer for live data. In that case, that's not an issue. But that is how it works internally. So basically, it removes the uh, overhead of getting unnecessary, not required data at the moment. And let us say I come back to the screen. I'm not getting the data once again. Whatever I got earlier, I had to load the UI then and there. I'm not getting it once again. If I have to get it once again, I'll have to call the same function again in onStart. So doesn't makes a lot of sense. So I hope this was clear to everyone, like the code example, how actually view model saves a lot of computational time and memory by sending the data only when it is required and not doing it whenever we get it from the API. Cool. Anyone has any question? So that was all about my presentation. Having a look. Uh, ठीक है तो we'll come to so Bhargav Pandey. Bhargav Pandey, is this a question or were you answering a question by this? Cool. When we go back from activity A, makes a lot of sense. ठीक है. So coming to Ompura, is the same view model concept application to Hilt view model? Yep. Hilt view model basically whenever we are using Hilt or Dagger for dependency injection, it uses your same function internally, but it saves you a lot of time doing it yourself. So if I just show you that, since you have mentioned, so you must be already aware. So just a second. Cool. So what it basically does is you don't actually have, you just have to add the annotation, and you don't actually have to go and create that one. It basically, you just specify an entry point and it handles this dependency injection for you. So HILT is a concept of dependency injection. It's a way of doing that. And yep, it is the same concept applicable to any type of view model, because at the end of the day, HILT view model also, let me see, example view model extends the view model class written by Android. So it's basically using the same view model class. And suspend function cannot call from main thread. Yep, that's the thing. Like the reason, that's exactly correct. We should use dispatches.io for that in case we are getting the data from API. But the reason was doing this was not to create unnecessary confusion. We can basically do this dispatches.io and makes a lot of sense. So you are correct. It is a preferred practice to use this. Sure, Ashwini will share this, and Amit Verma. Amit, I've covered your point. That's exactly. So everyone in the meeting, Amit is correct here. We should use, whenever we are fetching data from resources like repositories, local or remote, we should use dispatches.io. Once again, the reason I had not done that was to avoid confusions about dispatches and their threads. So yeah, that's a very good practice that you pointed out. Arpit Patel asks, yep, Rajesh. We need to scope. We can. Just scope is required. Yep, you are correct. Because as many of us will be aware, if we have tried making API calls from main thread, networking on main thread is a very big exception that we get. So we need a coroutine scope to just shift it to a coroutine rather than the main thread that we are doing processing on. And suspend, we need to change scope. You just need a coroutine scope. Cool. Ashwini, need the slide for better understanding. We'll share it. We'll share it. And also, I'll add a little bit of details. Session manually. Let me go ahead and try it in real time to avoid any confusions. Cool. If I go ahead and, was it local? It's local now. Array, I will test it here only. Hmm. Delete, remove. You can only, I guess we can only remove the observers for that. Should be a way. I'll check. Once again, this is a use case that I've never come across, that we want to actually clear a view model or remove that kind of case. But must be possible. There must be a get around that. View model clear Kotlin. We can do it for live datas, and just not so sure about exactly if we can create or not. We actually, this is clearing the whole view model store. So now this is not preferred because this will clear the whole view model store, what we saw in the slides here. Just a second. So this is not a preferred way of doing this. We don't want to actually clear all the view models. So hmm, must be doable, but that is a very specific use case when you have a memory leak. Mhm. You can use a simple function, but the reason for using suspend was using that delay. Delay is something that needs to be done on threads. Like concept of programming here is कि आपको you need a thread to run delay. So let me show you. So basically delays your coroutine without blocking a thread and resumes it after some time. Since I'm using asynchronous operation here, I need a suspend function. If I remove this, I don't. So there's no necessary condition that you need suspend function only in your view model. But since Rajesh also mentioned, we use dispatches.io to get data from networking sources, model classes basically, remote or local. So that is the case when we want to create suspend functions and launch it from coroutine scopes. Can be IO, main, whatever is the case. But suspend function are only required for coroutines. If you have a function that does not require anything like multi-threading, etc., go ahead and use a normal function. It's not an issue. So related to your use case, completely related to your use case. Inter. Mhm. Up when you are using, I'll give you a clear intro. So just to avoid confusion, when you are doing anything that requires, Abhi, just let us see the delay class here. So I hope it is clearly visible. I'll make it clearly visible. Check it. So basically, since delay is a coroutine for a given time without blocking. So when you don't want to block user interaction, that is when we need a suspend function. We tell okay, launch a thread. Coroutine is a wrapper over threads, right? So in case you're giving some information, coroutine is a wrapper over thread. It makes our lives easier. So when we don't want to actually block something, that is when we need suspend function. And if I go back to this view model and if I create a normal function, let us say I'm doing something here which require 5 seconds. So my compiler will wait 5 seconds to finish for the task to finish and then we'll go ahead. And in case you wait 5 seconds, you get ANR because your app is stuck for 5 seconds or more since the limit is 5 seconds. So that is why we need suspend functions. We want to perform a task that is critical for application but not so critical that we want to stop the user interaction on that. So that is again, once again, depending on your use case. If this function has the simple work of emitting the data, there is no sense to use suspend. But in my case, I wanted to delay the response. And if I had not used if I had used delay without a suspend function, imagine adding a delay of 5 seconds and you get an ANR. So threads. So basically when we need coroutines or thread and we want to do something with them, that is when this comes into picture. हाँ, launch it from a coroutine scope and coroutine scope के बाद you can switch it to dispatcher scopes जो IO mean default or whatever options we have. Cool. Any other questions, guys? Uh, go ahead. Right. In case if you are not finishing the first activity after firing the intent, it won't create a new object. So when you explicitly go out of your way and tell Android to finish the activity, that is removed from its stack, it's gone. It's nowhere to be visible or navigated to. That is the case when your view model object is deleted. And if you launch the intent back to that screen, there can be two cases. You can go from B to A via firing an intent or the backstack. So, so intent means you are basically telling Android, okay, I need to go back to another class, right? You are not telling backstack means that let's go to the previous class. Firing an intent means go back to another class. So since it's going to another class, it will create a new view model object because previously finish was called and finish led to destroying of the view model object. In that case, it will be maintained because backstack basically means we don't actually delete it, as you can see here, right? Let me go to a backstack means, let us say it is an on stop. It never goes to on destroy in case of backstack or finish, for example. Same view model instance will be retained in case you go specifically finish the activity, or let us say you don't add it to backstack in case of a fragment. So Android already knows that there is no case when I'm coming back to this activity or fragment until and unless an intent is fired or a fragment is loaded. So it will clear it. A new instance of view model. I don't think we can. Haha, go on. I guess it shouldn't. Once again, a use case that I have not encountered. So it is, in that case, it will remove according to the documentation written and what we can see. We can't modify these classes according to our use case. We can create an extension function over this view model store because Kotlin basically allows you to implement methods that are restricted using extension functions. We can go ahead and create it, but it will basically be like if it exists, clear, create a new one, and then return. So basically, you are just in your use case, if we are doing this, we'll be removing the key concept view model was made for. I guess we can do it using extension functions, but once again, not an advisable thing, and neither I have tried this. Maybe I can try this and will let you know because I haven't come across a use case where we want to create a new one because view model was created to store the data. That is once again doable, but not an advisable practice. Reason is as simple as because you don't like there will be a view model that will be already chained to the life cycle of activity A, and there will be a new view model that will be chained to the life cycle of activity A2 that you are opening again. So it completely violates the whole thing view model stands for. So doable, but once again comes down to your use case. So I guess there's a miscommunication in this part. Delegates is just a way of creating the view model object. It does not, once again to clarify to everyone in the meeting, delegates is a way of creating the view model object. It uses the same logics, but it is less boilerplate code for you for writing the whole factory, etc. So that is the easiest part delegate does is it is similar to late init, but there is a very specific reason why we prefer delegates over late init because of memory leaks. And the reason I know this is because we have memory leaks in our apps that we were trying to fix. Then we came across this. So delegates is Hanji. So delegates is by the syntax that I showed you for by is just a simple way of initializing this view model. It uses the same concept in depth inside it. It's using the same thing, but it is just a little less lines of code for you to handle. Next question. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. ठीक है. That is basically telling you जितना I can understand if we are writing in it in a view model, because व्यू मॉडल चेंज होता है आपके एक एक्टिविटी के लाइफ साइकिल से और फ्रेगमेंट के. तो इट इज टेलिंग कंटेक्स्ट दैट उस एक्टिविटी के अंदर एक थ्रेड लॉन्च होना चाहिए जो कि dispatches.io पे चलेगा. तो गेटिंग माई पॉइंट, dispatches.io is general dispatches.io for the whole application. So chaining it with view model scope or chaining it with context, and once again, context, according to me, context should be never passed to a view model. Uh, there's there's a reference about this in the official documentation. So for more, Hanji, go on, go on. I'm just sharing the link for everyone. Hanji, Hanji, Hanji. तो I'm just telling, हाँ उस केस में I'm telling you कोरूटीन स्कोप और ग्लोबल स्कोप और लाइफ साइकिल स्कोप का डिफरेंस यही है कि कोरूटीन स्कोप इज चेंज टू द कोरूटीन दैट यू विल लॉन्च इन योर एप्लीकेशन. Global scope is throughout the application, and life cycle scope is for the view that you are using. Can be activity or fragment or custom view that you have. ठीक. So in case you are adding context or let us say life cycle scope, then you are adding a dispatchers.io. So it will launch a dispatcher.io thread on IO, basically IO base in your application for your current activity of fragment. तो आपके context से change वो हो जाएगा, chain हो जाएगा. So that, sure, sure, go ahead. That's the reason. That's the real use case of using suspend. You are right. Like suspend basically tells. Yep, yep.